The British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith made his WCW debut beating Wild Bill Irwin and then afterwards said, Mr. Tony Schiavone, I am here but for one reason, to become the World Championship Heavyweight Championship of the world. You know, it's a good thing that Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, one of the best pure power athletes, one of the most gifted athletes of his generation, was really, really damn good in the ring and was so goddamn gifted that when motivated, could put on a near 5-star classic that people still remember some 30 plus years later. Like against Bret Hart or against Shawn Michaels, a couple matches in 1996. He was really, really damn gifted. And that's a good thing because promos were never really his thing. Become the World Championship, Heavyweight Championship of the world. Well, anyway, I'm John Renton with the Retro View WCW Superbrawl 3 in Ashville, North Carolina, and I'm going to say this much. While WCW does get a bad rep, and rightfully so, because let's be perfectly fucking honest, WCW put on a lot of really, really shit programming and didn't really know what the fuck they were doing, especially during the Jim Herd days, even with the talent that they had. Jim Herd was running off talent. This was after Jim Herd, though. Bill Watts had been put in charge, and let's just say a lot of people, Bill Watts is very divisive because a lot of people liked him, but they also realized by this point Bill Watts really didn't know what the fuck he was doing. He didn't really care at all. So executive producer Eric Bischoff became executive producer. This was his first pay-per-view as executive producer. I've said executive producer so goddamn much it's lost all meaning. Eric Bischoff would still be an on-air personality as an announcer for quite a while, actually, but a lot of people didn't really know, at least at first, but then since they would always do end credits like they were producing major motion pictures and sitcoms, baby. Terrible Dusty impression, I'm sorry. They would always know that he had something to do with it. This was a pretty damn good pay-per-view overall. It was a bit of a tumultuous time in WCW. They were going to break away from the NWA a little bit after this, and they were going to have the International Heavyweight Championship sometime in the fall of 1993. And then merge them, human centipede them together when Hogan, right when Hogan was going to come along in 1994. This had some pivotal moments, pivotable, if you will, and actually had some pretty good matches. It had the White Castle Affair strap-on match between Sting and Big Van Vader when they were strapping each other on and blooding each other. And actually, that's the thing. This is a pretty violent match for the cleaner version of WCW because this was when WCW, it was right before they were going to go Disney MGM Studios and start producing, a lot of television where they could just shoot it in front of an audience. They could shoot a whole bunch of shows and they could give people time off. They could, reduce the house shows to absolutely nothing and then rise up, get Hogan, get Savage and all that. So yeah, a lot of history with WCW. They end up retro-reviewing another WCW Super Brawl event. Number 8. Boy, you want to hear my opinion on some of that shit? Anyway, Ashville Civic Center, Asheville, North Carolina, 6,500 fans. Witness history in the making at the biggest event of the year. Witness history at the biggest event in wrestling history. No, Nick Goulas did not write that. I don't think Nick Goulas was alive in 1993. He might have been. I don't really know. So, the separate entranceways, yet there was the same curtain, so I don't think fans really bought into the whole goddamn thing. But Asheville, North Carolina, Crockett Stronghold, all about the White Castle Affair strap-on match with Dusty wanting to have Sting fly in a helicopter, go to this mountain area, this mountain fort, the Fortress of Solitude, so to speak, that Vader and Harley Race had, where there were midgets and weird shit. Or maybe, no, the midgets actually might have had something to do with the beach blast deal. But there were people working on the mountain like it's a goddamn aggro crag, and I just don't understand. Even at 12 years old, I'm like, what is this? Why? Why is this happening? So, Bischoff and Missy Hyatt, welcome us. This is right after we saw footage, by the way, of Sting being tag teamed by Barry from behind, Vader in the front, and Harley Race holding Sting. So it was a triple teaming of Sting. The man called Sting. He does this, he does that, and boy, he's going to take a lot of straps. That was kind of brutal. But Bischoff and Missy Hyatt welcome us. Don't understand really what they were doing with Missy Hyatt at this point because she can play a great bitch on television. UWF Missy Hyatt, even initially in WCW, and then they made her just squeaky clean. And I'm not knocking Missy. I've heard Missy's actually really nice. I just feel like they could have used her a little bit better. When she was with the Nasty Boys, that actually worked because they were utilizing her as a manager, and that didn't last very long. So here's Johnny B. Bad as a sailor. Shrieking Shenmue noises. Or Shenmue, however the hell you say that. I actually don't know how to say that correctly. You know the place where you can meet sailors around here? Anyway, Max Payne does a rendition of the national anthem. Max Payne, Man Mountain Rock. They never knew what to do with him, really. Then again, he could play guitar, which was cool. I guess he could also wrestle. Not really. We'll see more about that later. Schiavone and Ventura call the action. Stunning Steve Austin and Flying Brian. They had gotten the matching tights and were kind of they were developing the Hollywood Blondes deal. And they took on the team of, let's check my notes, Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Eric Watts. Marcus Alexander Bagwell actually wasn't all that bad, all things considered. He was never going to be great, but he at least got it as far as an in-ring standpoint. He understood how to at least add pizzazz to his persona. Because, he's a former male stripper, nothing wrong with that, but just that's what he was, so he knew about the showman aspect. Eric Watts was fucking Eric Watts here. I mean, that actually didn't make a lot of sense when I said that out, but Eric Watts was never good. Never good. And bless the guy. I'm not saying he wasn't a good athlete, he just wasn't cut out for wrestling. And by this point, Eric Watts, I think, was still in the company for at least a year. Maybe 15 months or so, a little bit longer. I mean, it was insane. This was an odd way to open the show, but it was Austin and Pillman before injuries really broke down Austin. And the crowd booed everything that Eric Watts did. Whenever he tagged in, whenever he did offense, they were booing everything. And I mean everything. It was like he had stolen... He had stolen their favorite pet or their favorite family member or, stolen their child's favorite toy. And they were going to boo him. Eric sucks. Eric sucks. Eric Watts sucks, actually, is what they were saying. But, well, Eric sucks. They could have been trying Eric Watts sucks, but Eric sucks works better. They hated him. They absolutely hated him. It's the reason why I compare Eric Watts to Dominic Mysterio, because they have about the same level of personality and about the same level of business being in a wrestling ring, as much as I have been on the International Space Station. Austin, Chance, and then later, a double axe handle on Bagwell. 1, 2, 3. That was from the top, by the way. And then Bischoff and Johnny B. Bad. They talk about, hey, Flair could be coming back, because Flair had just lost the loser leave WWE match against Mr. Perfect on the Raw right after the Royal Rumble 1993. And I always would have liked to have seen what Flair could have done at Mania. I mean, then again, given what they did to Backlund, had Backlund lose to Razor Ramon in, 5 minutes? I don't know if that would have worked. WrestleMania 9, actually. Ooh, WrestleMania 9. Here's a retro review I could do. Do you want me to retro review WrestleMania 9? Answers in the comments, please. Yay! 93. WCW put on a pay-per-view like this, and WWE put on WrestleMania 9. So, we cut to Ric Flair's limousine. Missy Hyatt gets refused an interview, and then we want Flair a chance. We get Too Cold Scorpio versus Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit in weird Zubaz type tights for some reason. Okay. A match that actually was memorable for the fact that Too Cold Scorpio is featured on a big stage, and Benoit working with New Japan and stuff like that. This is a chance for him to be seen. And yeah, it was cool to see. It was given almost 20 minutes. I cannot objectively watch Chris Benoit matches anymore. I fucking can't. I'm sorry. I mean, there are certain things I just can't objectively watch anymore. Head trauma, whatever, all that stuff. He made the choice for two people that had no choice in that goddamn just tragedy. So I can't objectively watch it, but that being said, I do remember this match being quite good. It was well done. And there was a roll-up with seconds left and Too Cold Scorpio won. I got a question for you. Can you actually watch Chris Benoit matches and try to and can you separate the wrestler from what he did? If you can, you're better than me, because I've tried for years and years and years. We're approaching 16 years this coming June. Anyway, Bischoff is with Max Payne. He does the taps thing, he does that because he's going to take out Dustin Rhodes. The British Bulldog then beat Wild Bill Irwin. Bulldog got a big pop and beat him with a power slam. There wasn't much to this. And then he says he's here to become the world championship, heavyweight championship of the world. Missy Hyatt gets picked on again. Bischoff interviews Paul Orndorff, interrupted by Cactus Jack, who jumps him, and they just have their big old fracas, and then they go right into a Falls Count Anywhere match, where it's amazing that Foley can still walk, having done some of the stuff that he did here. He did a sunset flip to the floor that sort of worked, sort of didn't. And then he did that famous spot where he gets skipped over a couple rails. And Orndorff did end up dominating here for a bit, but eventually got hit with a shovel. They spent more time outside the ring than they did inside the ring, but Orndorff at this point was a couple of years away from being, being fully on retired, outside of a couple spots like a Superbrawl 2000. Ho boy! And 1, 2, 3. So shovel shot wins it. Good match. Crowd was popping for it. Crowd started to get a little bit tired, but it was pretty good overall. Jim Cornette introduces the Heavenly Bodies, Stan Lane, and Tom Pritchard, Dr. Tom Pritchard. And then we get Morton and Gibson taking on the Heavenly Bodies with Jim Cornette. Eaton tried to come out to maybe not Eaton the odds. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. The late, great Bobby Eaton. I would love to have seen him in this match, but he was under contract to WCW. This is more of a Smoky Mountain type match that they were trying to have. And Cornette's talked about this on his podcast. I'm just going to give a brief overrun. But Bill Watts had talked about, I guess Bill and Cornette, going back to their Mid-South days, had talked about having possible talent trades, starting a business relationship. People could be sent away from WCW, like Arn Anderson, Bobby Eaton, various others could be sent for a few shots in Smoky Mountain to rehab them, have them come back from injury, wrestle for a little bit. That's how Paul Orndorff went from Smoky Mountain back to WCW. And that began that working relationship. And had Bill Watts stayed in charge, boy, WCW probably wouldn't have been in the best goddamn shape, but it would have led to Smoky Mountain Wrestling and WCW working together. But then that's why, once Bischoff got in, and that whole thing happened where Cornette's comments got edited. This was during Bill Watts' I think, final television appearance. He had put that whole thing in writing where they couldn't fuck with it, and Cornette was going to get his money. I think he mentioned something about, he said, they just had people do some stuff or whatever, like the White Castle affair or whatever it was, where they spent $50,000 to have this and nobody knows what the hell's going on. Give me half that, and I'll give you this match, and we can talk about a business relationship, possibly. And then Bischoff claimed that he didn't edit the stuff, and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But the bottom line is this was the end of the whole damn thing. Dusty was being put in charge as far as booking and stuff like that, but Cornette went back to doing Smoky Mountain Wrestling and would send talents to the WWF because he would start working with them in the summer of '93 when he became the American spokesperson for Yokozuna. If I encapsulated that correctly, I'd be amazed because that was a lot. The people were into this. The crowd chanted rock and roll, rock and roll. They did all the usual spots. Cornette interfered a couple times. Lane and Pritchard did some great heel tactics, eventually building to the hot tag. Referee got distracted. Referee got, out of position a few times. Eaton tried to interfere. That knee drop he did off the top ended up hitting Pritchard instead. Rock and Roll Express get the victory. Good match. Good flashbacks to the Crockett days. They weren't that far removed. You have to remember, Crockett only sold to Turner in late October, early November of '88. This was just 4 years removed from Crockett basically being... Wait, Lizzie. Yeah, just about 4 years removed. 4 and change. So it wasn't that far removed. Everything in WCW accelerated quite a bit, if you remember. To think about when Turner bought it, by the time they started losing money, Turner had only had it for about a decade. But then that's when they have All-Time Warner and all that. This was pretty good, though. What wasn't good, unfortunately, was Dustin Rhodes taking on Max Payne for the U.S. Championship. And Ron Simmons was supposed to be there in Max Payne's position, but he had an injured shoulder. A lot of arm focus, and this didn't click. This just didn't click at all. This was kind of the cool-down match, and eventually a ref bump where Max Payne just grabs the referee and out of an abdominal stretch and gets DQ'd. They have a bit of fracas afterwards. We get a post-match because that's what we wanted to see. And then more White Castle Affair strap-on stuff. Schiavone interviews Rick. He's happy to be back. And he's a woo, all that and everything. He didn't get a lot of time because I think a couple matches ran over. Barry went, and he couldn't wrestle, by the way. He couldn't wrestle until, I think it was Beach Blast 93. I think it was Beach Blast 93. I'm trying to remember. Because he had a non-compete as far as being in the ring. He could be on television. He just couldn't be in the ring for a bit. So it was either Slamboree or Beach Blast. I think it might have been Beach Blast. But then Flair became champion, beating Barry Windham after Barry Windham beat the Great Muta. We want Flair a chance, so don't worry, they'll get him. Muta was gifted. Muta did some stuff. Barry, by this point, the injuries, the weight, and the conditioning were catching up to him, the lack of conditioning. He was still fine here. But if you just take a look at him in the summer, it was like night and day. Like, he looked fine here, and it just didn't look like anything was going right for him by that point. He did end up hitting a DDT, sort of, 1, 2, 3. 24 minutes, and while I know what they were trying to do, the crowd popped for the finish. They either popped because Barry won or popped because it was over. This was okay. It didn't necessarily click, because Muta was going to be going back to Japan anyway, where he would have a much better career. Hiro Matsuda, by the way, was in his corner. And then we get Vader versus Big Van Vader. And we get Vader versus Big Van Vader. Vader versus Sting. Boy, I can really goddamn talk today. Vader versus Vader. Vaderception. Too many Vader pronouns, pal. Vader versus Sting. Harley Race in the corner. White Castle Affair strap match. Non-title. And you got to think about their feud. Like, as far as big matches. Great American Match 92. Vader beats Sting. And then they build up to some stuff like at Starrcade 92, one of my favorite matches they ever had, King of Cable Finals, whatever that was. And then they build up to this. Now, non-title, but if Sting won, he would obviously get a chance at the title. Because Vader had beaten Ron Simmons late 92, early 93. I don't quite remember, because I know Starrcade 92 happened at the end of, 1992, obviously. So I don't remember exactly when it happened, but it happened soon after that. Because Vader defended against, was it Dr. Death? I think it was Dr. Death. They beat the shit out of each other. You had to touch all four corners in succession, by the way, and successfully. If you touch them unsuccessfully, you're not going to win. That's not how that works. But they beat the shit out of each other. There was some blood and violence. Vader's back got cut up. Vader's face got cut up because his mask got taken off. Sting got busted open on the forehead. This was how you did blood and how you did it right. And they just beat the shit out of each other. Some splashes. Vader wasn't even going for the corners at some point. Sting would get him outside. Get Vader outside and try to touch the corners. Dragging him around the ring. Which actually is a pretty ingenious way of doing a strap match, to be perfectly honest. The referee did kind of get knocked out of position. Vader was being dragged around. Sting got all the corners except one. And then Harley tripped him up. And I don't know why he tripped him up necessarily, because the referee wouldn't have seen it. But maybe he did, just in case the second referee would have seen it. And then the crowd's booing as Vader drags him around. He's almost got the fourth corner. He's struggling, and Sting kicks him away, and Vader touches the corner and wins. So Sting looks like an idiot because he kicks his opponent away. I mean, you would want Vader to be away from you, but he looked like an idiot kicking him away right into the corner, but it is what it is. Vader wins. Sting still looks pretty dominant and idiotic for that stuff. But he doesn't win, but it was a hell of a match. The announcers kill time. Johnny B. Bad, Missy Hyatt are going to go party, I guess. And Barry Windham gets interviewed, which will lead to Barry Windham versus Arn Anderson, I believe it's Slamboree 93. So, overall, pretty damn good event. I'm not going to say spectacular, but a lot more good than bad. Now, let's move on to other stuff. Anyway, agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rentlin. I'll see you soon.